Guys, you have the special occasion to listen to Mr. FATIH BIROL, who is a kind, I would say, of energy's pop. Since 2015, he is the executive director of the International Energy Agency, which is the global authority on energy with expertise across all fuels and all technologies. The IEA works with governments and with the major international corporations throughout the energy industry. So, Mr. Birol, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm really delighted to welcome you at our school. You've recently said that you feel increasingly optimistic about the future and the possibility of a world based on clean energy, so we are eager to understand the reasons of your optimism. Mr. Birol will hold a keynote speech, and then we will have a conversation with the Enel CEO, Mr. Francesco Starace. So many thanks, Mr. Birol, for your time. It's really an honor for us to listen to you. Guys, don't waste this opportunity, and Federico FUBINI then will chair this special panel at our school.
So thank you very much for inviting me, and greetings from Paris, IEA headquarters. Greetings to all the colleagues, including my dear colleague friend Francesco Starace. And thank you for inviting me to this event. So I want to first start with a qualifier. I said I am optimistic about the future of clean energy rather than the future. Future is a bit more general, but I am definitely optimistic about the future of clean energy around the world. But before going that, I want to, if you allow me, tell you a few things, how the COVID affected the energy world. With one sentence, I can tell you that this COVID is the largest ever disruption on energy world in the history. Energy world never had such a major disruption for any reason. To give you perhaps two numbers. One, this year we expect global energy use, global energy demand to decline about 5%. In order to put in a context to understand how important it is, if we remember the 2008-2009 financial crisis, at that time also energy demand declined. This year's decline in the global energy demand is 7 times higher than it was in the year 2008-2009. So just to put in a context how huge it is. And it is affecting across the energy sector. For example, the investments in the energy sector this year will decline about 20%, mainly in oil, gas, and coal. And this decline in the entire energy sector, investment decline 20%, again, is the biggest in the history. The current, the biggest uncertainty we are facing today in the world is, in terms of energy, what if there is a second wave of pandemic, and how will it affect the entire world and the economy? This is the biggest uncertainty today we are facing. Now, at the same time, you all, I'm sure, know very well, in many countries, if not all the countries around the world, the economy, nation economies are in recession, going down very badly. And as we speak now, more than 300 million people around the world, more than 300 million people around the world, they have lost their jobs. And this will continue. I think a word that we are going to hear and use more and more in the next months to come is unemployment. It is like a dark cloud over our current discussions, current social and economic lives. Now, therefore, it's a grim year, a bleak year. Why do I feel optimistic about clean energy transitions? I have 4 reasons. Number one, especially in the last 18 months, the cost of renewables, solar and wind, they are plummeting, almost a free fall. Solar today became the cheapest source of electricity generation in many countries around the world. And this is wonderful news and for clean energy transitions and for addressing our climate problems. This is number one, good news and reasons for optimism. Number two, many of the clean energy investments require upfront huge amount of money. And in most cases, their fuel is for free, wind, solar, and others. And we are in a period where we are going to see ultra-low interest rates in most of the countries, especially in the advanced economies, which could help to finance some of those investments. This is the second reason why I am optimistic about the clean energy transitions. Third reason, more and more governments around the world are putting their weight behind clean energy. Europe, for example, came up with a very strong net zero target for 2050, but not only Europe, several countries around the world, from Korea to Canada, from Canada to New Zealand, and more countries. We have heard the recent statement of President of China, are putting their weight behind clean energy. So this is a government support is very important. Fourth reason for optimism is several companies, energy companies, traditionally oil and gas companies, for example, they are putting a larger share of clean energy in their business portfolios. This can be solar, this can be hydrogen, this can be offshore wind, this can be electricity whatsoever. They are doing this for 2 reasons. One, they want to be a part of the solution for climate change. And the second, they want to prepare their companies better for a future which will be dominated by the clean energy sources. So to put it together, the big drop, continuing big drop in the renewable energies, their cost is getting cheaper and cheaper, increasing government support and targets, stepping up of the private companies, energy companies, but also several IT technology companies in terms of clean energy, and the ultra-low interest rates makes me optimistic about the future of clean energy. Now, I have maybe one issue I want to mention, which is an area that we have to pay attention to, which is a major challenge. Many challenges, of course, countless challenges, but one of them is, in my view, very, very important. When we discuss the clean energy, climate change, we are mainly thinking of, if we build a power plant, it should be clean. If we build an industry facility, it should run with clean fuels. If we build a building, this building should be efficient. This is good. And I hope we will do this. But there is an important blind spot of the climate change debate, which is we already have in the world already built existing energy infrastructure, power plants, industry facilities, iron, steel, aluminum, chemical, cement, buildings, lots of buildings, inefficient buildings. If they continue throughout their normal operation life, a building has a lifetime of 80, 90 years, inefficient building. An iron steel facility, plant, has a lifetime of 40, 50 years. Most of those existing infrastructure is fueled by fossil fuels. And if we do not intervene the existing infrastructure and find sustainable solutions to them, the fact that the new infrastructure we are going to build clean alone is not enough. We have two jobs. One, whatever we build new should be clean. Second, we already need to clean up to the infrastructure we have, which is in many cases old and inefficient. So we have to cure the current system and build the new healthy one. So in that respect, to finish my words, coming back to again where we are today, the governments around the world have two big immediate challenges. Number one, to address the health crisis. Number two, to address the economic crisis. And in order to address the economic crisis, many governments come up with economic recovery plans. Up to now, it is about $11 trillion put on the table to give a boost to economic recovery through different policies. It is extremely important that governments around the world, when they put these economic recovery packages, they do put incentives for the clean energy technologies, ranging from renewables to hydrogen, from hydrogen to the modernization of our electricity grids, from grids to energy efficiency. And this type of energy policies, if they are implemented, integrated in the economic recovery packages, they can help the economic growth, create jobs, and at the same time prepare for us a clean energy future. And I can tell you that one of the reasons why many governments, from Americas to China, from China to Europe, from Europe to Korea, Japan, they are pushing that they have to prepare their domestic industries for the competition of the future. And I know that many governments are doing it in a fierce manner, and it also helps, there is a healthy competition among many countries, and I am happy that Europe and Italy is taking this challenge seriously, and as I heard several times directly from Prime Minister Conte, Italy takes green energy, clean energy seriously, and as such, one of the thought leaders of the European Green Deal. So I thank you very much once again inviting me to this excellent gathering. I look at the list of the speakers. There are wonderful speakers from whom I can learn a lot, including, as I said, my dear colleague, Francesco Starace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birol. I think before we move to questions, we have a conversation with our two panelists. We have a few slides that we can quickly have a look at. There are a couple of them that I really wanted to show you if they are up. Well, if not, here they are. No, this is not the one I was looking for. Not really. Another chance? No. Well, if we can't find them, maybe we will take a look at them when they are up, and I move to questions. Maybe is this the one? No. I would start with you, Mr. Starace. Your company, under your leadership, has turned into probably the largest private sector producer of renewables in the world, in Europe, and probably also in the world. You clearly believe in this path ahead. At the same time, and this is one of the slides I wanted to show you, in fact, if we look globally over the last few years, investment in renewables has not gone up. So what is it? Those are the slides. Maybe we can move ahead next. Ahead a couple of slides. Another one. Next. Next. Again. Here it is. As we can see, investments in renewables and in general investments in dampening net CO2 emissions has not gone up over the last few years. Although we have been talking about these issues a lot, one would have expected that both private sector and public sector companies and governments invested more. How do you explain this relative reluctance of your competitors in going down this road?
Well, first of all, let me just say it's always a pleasure. It's always enlightening to hear what Fatih says on these things, and the way in which he projects the synthetic views of IEA, which is always interesting. Here, I think it's an old story. You've heard from Fatih that the costs per megawatt of renewable energy sources has been going down since several years in quite a dramatic fashion. So the argument is that the same amount of money buys more megawatts year after year after year. So if you would take these charts and do not project the cumulative amount of billions of dollars, but rather the megawatts bought and installed by this megawatt, by the $1 billion, you would say, and you would observe a growing trend. That said, it is true that the average year installed investment in renewables, although it's around roughly 300 billions a year in terms of dollars, should double. I mean, it should be around 570, 600 billions if we want to have a chance to meet the Paris Agreement 2030 deadlines. So the question is still a valid one. So, and the issue is, I think, the limitation lies in the fact that for quite a long time, several parts of the world have not really been considering this as an active policy to be pursued. That is changing. I think, if I can say, this COVID-19 disruption that Fatih just mentioned, I see it also in another way. I see it like, imagine if we could travel in time and go 20 years in the future and then come back. That would be a big disruption in everything we know about our life. And I think in many ways, this COVID-19 has been a jump in the future for everybody under distressful conditions, but somehow a glimpse in what this is coming to us. It is a big accelerator of certain trends that are already underway for those that want to understand them. And I think some governments have taken the view that this glimpse in the future is better to take for real. So I think it is not by chance that the two parts of the world that were hit very hard and in chronological order, first and second, by the COVID-19 crisis, took serious steps to commit to increasing attention to greenhouse gas emissions and therefore renewable growth. One is China, that for the first time has committed and has targeted to peak its emission by 2030 and be CO2 neutral by 2060, which it was unthinkable just last year, for example. And Europe, which took a bolder step to go 55% greenhouse gas emission when compared to 90 levels, which is a lot, and to be totally neutral by 2050. Then we know that Japan also took steps, and we know that India also is taking commitments. So I think it will take probably 2-3 years before you see an acceleration in installations, because clearly investors need to have clarity on these targets and therefore start investing. Who is missing here is, of course, the federal government of the USA. And I'm using this term because that is a part of the US picture, because member states of the Union are indeed active in greenhouse gas emission reduction policies, and the economics work. So all in all, I think that is due to uncertainty on policies that has for some time slowed down, or let's say have investors think about that investing in this kind of field is good, but perhaps not the only thing. I think that's gone now after this year, and you probably see an acceleration. Our observation from where we stand is that there are 4 additional reasons on top of what FATIH just mentioned, and one being that technology is strongly pushing in favor of renewables. The improvements of material sciences, so stuff with which our plants are made of, drive in that direction, and the digital revolution drives in that direction. And the reduction in cost and improvement of performance of renewable energy plants derive exactly from this. And then there are other reasons, but this thing is that for me, the most important news in this field is that the appetite of investors for sustainable ideas and initiatives and projects is incredible. It's an incredible force pushing in this field. We see no end to an expansion of the renewable energy space in the next 10 years. And you're right, since we are establishing a world record of installed capacity every year, beating our own record of the previous year, but still, every year, we cannot get more than 3%, and we are the largest installer play, more than 3% of the total installed world base. That shows that this is an expanding space, and we see no end to this expansion for the next 10 years. So it's a fantastic business in which to be active, because when you have an expanding market characterized by fierce competitive behavior, this is the renewables today. It's an incredible competitive battlefield. You have life. You have an incredible opportunity to create value, provided you stay competitive and grow your business aggressively. And that's what we're committed to do at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your fascinating remarks. You touch upon a point that is on everybody's mind these days, whether this crisis will mark the beginning of deglobalization or else an acceleration of globalization different direction, a slightly different direction. You seem to militate on the latter option. This is also maybe for another time an interesting thing to discuss, but I would like to turn part of the same question to Mr. Birol, because I think you have been on the record saying that despite the increasing effectiveness of investment in renewables, the current level of investment is just not enough to hit the targets. So would you stand by that assessment?
Very much so, because to make it simple, if we were to reach our climate goals, we are racing against time. This is number one. Number two, most of the renewables that Francesco was talking about, I mentioned solar, wind, we use them today mainly to generate electricity generation. But we use energy in other parts of the world. For example, airplanes, trucks, cars, the heavy industry. You cannot use renewables per se as of they are today to address those challenges, because electricity sector today alone is responsible 38% of the emissions. More than 60% comes from the other sectors I mentioned. How we are going to decarbonize those parts of the energy is a critical one, and with renewables alone we cannot solve this. What do we need? We need improvements in energy efficiency. We need new technologies, such as hydrogen. It's a very critical technology, and we have to bring the cost of hydrogen down in order to make sure that we can decarbonize other sectors where the emissions come from. Renewables are good, growing strongly, but alone they are not enough. We need innovation in other clean energy technologies in the transportation sector, in industry, in buildings, and also push very strongly the use of energy much more efficiently.
We in Europe are very proud of our new targets that are being even stepped up, as Mr. Starace just mentioned, and now we are talking about the target of a drop in net emission by 55% by 2030, and then of course net neutrality by 2050. We are leading the world, and we are proud, and rightly so, of being the leaders, at least in this kind of technologies, globally. However, when you talk to industrial sectors here and there that are not energy producers, not renewable energy producers, I can feel the concern that being so ambitious, maybe we are also, those sectors are also going to be priced out of the international markets, because take hydrogen. The cost of hydrogen has dropped hugely. I think it was 60 times oil barrel, but now it's still twice as much. Correct me, Mr. Starace, if I'm wrong. So what would you say? It's a question for both of you. What would you say to those concerns, to those manufacturing producers who would like to compete on a par with international competitors?
I think they need to understand where technology is going, because that's where the game is. There's nothing else other than that. The issue is, do you really want to put your future energy costs at stake with the volatility which will clearly be increasing, and unpredictability plus insecurity of fossil fuels and run the risk of paying a high carbon price, which is invariably going to come at you? Or would you rather buy cheaper electricity with a fixed cost, which today is available with renewables? And I think, you know, those people that look at the truth without having a biased eye view that comes from the past, switch. I mean, we see an increasing appetite for renewable energy coming from the industry, from all kinds of markets. And that is, this is a trend that is unstoppable, I would say. So you have to understand, this is an evolution, and you always have someone that doesn't understand it. And it's sorry, and it's sad to see industrial giants, even and clever people, not getting this point. They will always get it a little later, but finally they will all get it. On the hydrogen side, I think the issue is pretty straightforward. And again, similarly at what has happened with PV panels, or what is happening under our eyes with batteries, this is going to happen with hydrogen too. There is a technology, there are different technologies to produce hydrogen, and those that use coal and gas are used in 98% of the cases, and the volumes produced by these technologies are today, by and large, they're responsible of the heavy carbon footprint of the hydrogen being produced around the world. But if you look at the fact that there is another way of producing hydrogen through hydrolyzers, and you know that this requires an incredible effort in bringing down the costs of the hydrolyzers themselves in order for this to be competitive. You say this has happened already in different technologies many other times, provided you give a niche luxury application a large industrial base, you can reduce costs by orders of magnitude. And we have evidence that this can be done in a time frame that is not more than 5 years. Then the question remains, who is going to provide the electricity to break water into hydrogen and oxygen without CO2? And that means a lot of renewable capacity to be put at work. And that's, again, we go back to Fatih's point. It's true, the world needs much more renewable capacity than today people think. And it requires much more renewable capacity that today the financial community is looking at. But that I can assure you, the potential of renewable capacity generation on planet Earth is thousands times higher than what today we have. So it's a question of scale, and it's a question of time. So it's about when, not about if it happens. And insofar the industry in Europe, I think the European market, the European Union has made it very clear. Europe needs to decarbonize by 2050, and there is a lot of money available in order to do it without leaving people behind. So those that get it first understand it and get a competitive advantage. And Europe might become much more competitive than the rest of the world if they keep this momentum going.
If I may add something on Europe, because, Mr. Chairman, you asked a very good question about Europe. We are proud, you said. I think Europeans have all the right to be proud to have such an ambitious target. And I would definitely congratulate all the European leaders. But if I may, I want to put in a context. Now, climate change is a global problem. 1 ton of CO2, carbon, going to atmosphere from Jakarta, or from Milan, or from Detroit, or from Beijing, it has the same effect on everybody. Emissions do not have a passport. They affect everybody. So, why I am saying this? Because Europe today accounts less than 8% of the global emissions. 92% comes from somewhere else. Europe pushing the agenda is very good from a moral point of view, to have a leadership point of view, but if we want to solve this problem, we need similar position from other governments around the world. One other issue about Europe. Now, Europe makes a move, very good in terms of clean energy, and can well be ready for the clean energy industry of the future. I will not say will be ready, may well be ready, because Europe has to learn from the history. Solar energy, I mentioned how important solar energy is. Solar energy took off, pushed with huge subsidies in Europe some 10 years ago. But when you look at today, 7 out of 10 solar panels manufactured in the world are in China. So Europe started to run, if you think like a marathon, but somebody else finished the marathon. So I hope, for example, the hydrogen, in the electrolyzers, Europe has been again a pioneer. And I really hope that Europe will start the marathon very strongly and finish the marathon as the number one. So therefore, the energy policies are not alone enough, right, energy policies. One needs, I think, look beyond that, and there's a role for government leaders to pay attention to be the technology leader today, but also to make sure that it is also tomorrow.
Can I add? I think what Fatih said is extremely important, because another lesson learned from the COVID-19 crisis is the let's say fragility of the supply chains. Remember, there was a moment in which the disruption due to lockdowns generated reverberations in unthinkable value chain and supply chain positions. So I think Europe has understood this pretty well. In fact, for example, we have one of the last factories working on panels in Europe, and we are now planning to decuplicate its potential productivity in order to have about 4,000 megawatts a year of production in Europe on PV panels of last generation. And there is no reason why Europe should be a more expensive production place than China. And there is these panel manufacturing plants are heavily automized, and they are all about technology and cost of capital. So there is no reason why you should let this be a Chinese manufacturing monopoly. And the same for batteries. I think today you've seen that in a way the automotive industry of Europe requires batteries to be at least partially available in production in Europe. And the same, I think, will probably happen with electrolyzers, given the attention that the EU Commission is putting on this. But clearly the supply chains, which will remain largely global, this is clear, and no one is even dreaming of building everything in an isolated manner. But for certain key components and certain key industries, I think it's really important that the competitiveness of Europe remains solidly in the hand of Europe itself.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Birol has to go now, if I understand correctly. I was told. And so we would like to thank him for attending this panel, enlightening as usual. Thank you very much for your participation, and we hope to see you again in Italy maybe once this COVID crisis is over. Thank you very much, Mr. Birol.